Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
what has been irrevocably harmed because of how it's portrayed in the media? CPR. People think that CPR brings people back to life, when only 2% of people receiving basic CPR alone will survive. But alone is the key word. You keep doing CPR until the ambulance arrives and they start advanced CPR, which has better chances of survival. And when the person recovers from heart arrest, they don't gasp, open their eyes and start talking like normal. They might need weeks to recover and lots of physical therapy after they are discharged. Yup, CPR is designed to keep the patient's blood pumping long enough that more intensive care can be reached. You're buying that person time. Likewise, I think the public still thinks of defibrillators as the big, bulky, rub-together hospital ones that require specialized training to do. In reality, the modern aid is designed to be partially idiot-proof and will verbally walk you through the process. It'll even has a metronome so you can get the rhythm right for CPR. You may not perform as well as someone who is certified, but you may buy them enough time that said person can get there and take over. Likewise, Good Samaritan laws are commonly in place to protect you. I'm pretty sure that all 50 states have Good Samaritan laws on the books, but always be aware of what your local laws allow. Edit, just wanted to add something regarding the CPR aid process. Step 1 is actually not CPR, or the AED, or even to verify breathing. Step 1 is always to initiate the EMS system by calling 911 or your local equivalent. They need to be on the way as soon as possible. You can either do that yourself or by designating someone else. And I mean that quite literally. Don't just say, someone call 911 inches, point to someone specially and tell them to do it. People are more likely to do so that way. Also, I've seen 2 shows recently where someone does chest compressions on a woman in entirely the wrong place. Yes, we have boobs, but that doesn't change where our hearts are. I'm sure it's something puritanical about not wanting to show characters doing something that could be perceived as inappropriate, but women are less likely to receive CPR from bystanders for this very reason. Please could we show that it's just how it works when the patient has tits? Edit, cause there have been a couple of comments about it. This isn't about being to the left or right, it's about being way too high up or way too low down. The film I saw had the compressions happening at the base of the woman's throat and the show had them below her rib cage. If you're interested, the film was greater than Fantastic Four, First Steps, less than, and the show was greater than Pluribus, less than. I'm not saying you should do compressions right on top of a boob, but when you do it in the right place, chances are your hands will touch some titty in the process. Yes, as a nurse, I have done advanced ACLS, CPR on way too many people who honestly should not have been receiving it. There's a huge disconnect of what it looks like, what it entails, and the stratification of outcome based on multiple factors such as age, comorbidities, cause of arrest, and baseline health. Nothing will convince you more of this as you're doing chest compressions on an emaciated 80-year-old woman with metastatic disease, and hearing the loud snap and crunch of her sternum breaking, seeing the blood foam out of her mouth because a broken rib must have punctured a lung. Simultaneously, being asked to do everything by family waiting outside of the room. Even if we get them back, most resuscitation for individuals over the age of 70 have poor outcomes. Weeks of intubation in the ICU, organ failure, damage, dialysis, and fighting of infections caused by the multiple lines in their body. Just to die a month later. I wish I could upvote you 1,000 times. Healthcare has advanced so much that people do not realize that death is inevitable. And in many cases is a process that lasts several days. I had to say goodbye to my 90-year-old grandma several months ago. She was diagnosed with a terminal disease and decided to opt out of all treatments that would prolong her life and go straight to hospice. I was angry at first because she had stopped fighting, but she was able to say goodbye to all her loved ones and passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, after receiving palliative sedation instead of enduring weeks of pain and useless treatments. Now I realize that wanting to keep her alive at all costs was selfish. OCD is so different from how it's portrayed. It's not being neat. There's many different types and they all involve extremely strong anxiety and the feeling that you're the only person who can prevent something terrible. It can also manifest as a swarm of uncontrollable, horrible thoughts you don't want to have, which make you question if you're a good person. I met a dude with legitimate OCD and it opened my eyes. And he was like, yeah, I hate everyone LARPing being OCD because they like to be tidy. One of my friends also legitimately has it. She's lost jobs because she had to go home and check if the door was locked or the stove was turned off. She had to go back to her car to make sure it was locked. Me telling her I watched her lock her car door did not help. Her walking back halfway to class to check often did not help. She'd go back and check it multiple times because it was so bad. Having a roommate confirm the stove was off did not help either. It was so hard to watch because I could not help. She had to see for herself. I don't know how she's doing now, but I hope she found a way to help that. It was genuinely ruining her life. Jaws was massively detrimental to shark conservation. New Yorkers bite more people annually than sharks. I think it's because New Yorkers have difficulty finding sharks to bite. The author of the book is even upset with how people treat sharks now. He already died, but at least he spent the remaining years of life advocating for marine conservation. He even went so far as to say if he knew as much about sharks then as he eventually came to learn, he never would have written Jaws. The woman who was sent to the hospital by a McDonald's coffee. Discovery uncovered that McDs had trained employees to keep coffee at 180 F, around 20 degrees hotter than the industry standard at the time, and that they had a pattern, 700 plus customer complaints over a time frame I can't remember, of burning customers. If you serve as much coffee as McDs does, it's a statistical certainty that people are going to spill it sometimes. The jury found that continuing to serve coffee that hot even after multiple instances of people getting hurt was a breach of McD's responsibility to not injure their customers. That was the core fact of the case. The woman initially asked for McDonald's to cover her medical bills, she needed skin grafts, and McDonald's offered an insultingly low compensation. It wasn't until she was out of options that she decided to litigate. Instead, media and pop culture depicted her as someone who spilled a little bit of coffee on herself and saw dollar signs. McDonald's put a lot of money into making sure this is the version of the story that became well known. Just to add a bit more, she received third-degree burns on her thighs, butt and groin area, which is why she needed the aforementioned skin grafts. The court documents used the phrase, fused labia. Blind people don't want to touch your face. My sister is blind and half the people I have introduced to her have asked if she needed to touch their face to see what they look like. She's fucking blind, why would she care about your bone structure? She's not making masks. Portrayals of Helen Keller really did this one in. She wasn't touching people's faces to feel for what they look like, she read lips with her fingers. Edit, this has gotten more attention than I thought it would, so I thought I'd slip a little blind etiquette in here. It's cool to ask to shake their hand. They're not going to know if you want to otherwise. If you're moving from one place to another with a blind person, ask if they want you to lead them. If they say yes, ask if they prefer shoulder or elbow. You become their cane at that point. Let them know about weird elevation changes or shit in the way. You can joke about it, but don't be a dick. The sense of humor isn't tied to the sense of sight. My sister once pranked me on a plane by taking the window seat so I wouldn't have anything to look at. Legendary, blind people don't need to turn the light on in the bathroom. For the love of God, knock. Always knock. Helen Keller in general. People think she was solely famous for overcoming the odds, when she was actually also an activist passionate about socialism. Edit, holy shit, I had no idea about the eugenics thing. Nuclear power. Yes, this, and I hate how movies and cartoons, Simpsons, portray the steam coming out of the towers as radioactive nuclear waste. It's just water vapor, and I hate how people fear nuclear power because they're uneducated on radiation. Chernobyl melted down because the Soviets cut corners and used cheap materials. And the people inside were very stupidly doing the tests on reactor 4 while all the safety systems were off, and while the power was at a very low, unstable level. Because the power levels were low, the fail-safes were not able to work properly and contain the reaction. This led to an enormous surge in power that even the emergency shut-off button, AZ5, couldn't stop. That was all because of human idiocy and cheap materials. While I am generally pro-nuclear, I can understand that the fear of a government or private entity cutting corners and using cheap materials is a very valid concern for any new reactors being built. This isn't the answer you were expecting, but the public library. It's an institution dedicated to providing free services to everyone regardless of age, gender, income, religion, or color. They provide so much more than books. You can use a computer, check out movies and music, get help with resumes and applying for social services benefits. Hell, you can just sit and chill all day long and no one will bat an eye, but the media continues to harp on the mean librarian who shushes everyone. I've spent over 15 years working in libraries. I have never once shushed a person. The perception of what a library is and what it does is so incredibly outdated in the eyes of the media, and because of this perception many people will miss out on all the free services. I've spent over 15 years working in libraries. I have never once shushed a person. I worked at a library for 7 years, all through high school and part of college, and exactly one person was a shusher, and even the rest of the staff thought she was a bitch. She also didn't do much actual work, mostly just played Christmas music at her desk in the staff workroom year-round. Now, we did have to kick people out for watching porn on the computers disappointingly often. The true nature of pirates. They aren't some jolly band sailing the seas looking for adventure, they're desperate criminals who will kill you and take your shit. I love the South Park episode about this. It's a la T.I. Doe. To be fair, the original Pirates of the Caribbean's opening scene illustrated this horrifyingly well. Burning wreckage, people's clothes strewn about, floating bodies. I wish they had talked more about the Atlantic slave trade England was complicit in. Fun fact, there's a deleted scene in At World's End where you learn that the reason why Jack was being pursued by the East India Trading Co. was because he resented having his ship be used to transport slaves. When he released them, the East India Company burned his ship, which is not only why the Black Pearl is charred with black sails, but also why we made a deal with Davy Jones to get it back. It's the linchpin of the whole franchise, and they cut it.